Guys, next up, we got Acer laevigatum Hong Long.
Oh, I love this plant. We recently did a highlight video on some big specimens of these at the Buckholz Nursery. Go watch that video. We talk a lot about this one. I know Jim Putnam even has a highlight on this tree because he loves it as well. Introduction by the JCRA, so the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. Mark Wethen actually wild collected this tree. Now, Tim and I actually helped introduce this one, not by finding it. Mark did all the work. He found the tree, he got it back to America, he got it in the ground. The only thing we did is we said, Mark, this thing is crazy, and if you don't name it, we're going to name it after you. So Mark put the name Hong Long after it. If it not, Matt and Tim would introduce this as Mark Wethington because we absolutely love the tree. So we put a little applied pressure on him to come up with something interesting. Guys, I love that this one has a translucent-like older foliage. I mentioned it in that breakdown. Reminds me a lot of pewter. If you watch our channel a lot, you'll see us offer Stority of pewter, which has some blue-green older growth. This will leaf out an exquisite red, but you also get this weirder translucent shade to it, which is nothing, it looks like nothing else in the whole Acer world.
I mean, it's crazy that this tree was wild collected by Mark Wethington, and it has this crazy color on it that you don't find on typically Acer laevigatum. Laevigatum is one of those plants that plant explorers have loved because it grows at such high elevations. That means it can grow in our climate here and actually perform well. One thing we've learned is that you want to give it some protection from the hot afternoon sun to really let this tree thrive and do well. It typically grows an understory tree naturally, and we'd recommend growing this with some protection from the hot afternoon sun so that you'd really get the best growth out of this tree, but give it some morning sun so you get some of this red color this tree is famous for. The name Hong Long translates as red dragon, and that applies to the red new growth foliage, but that bark is one of the most purple red selections of any maple that I know of having such purple red bark.
Guys, these are grafted Acer palmatum, so they're in that same family and closely related. We put them on Japanese maple rootstock, but these can be done as rooted cuttings as well. Great purple bark to this one. Now, we find that here in zone 6B, these are deciduous. So these can be semi-deciduous depending on your zone, which doesn't bother them at all. They leaf back out every year with great looking flushes of red. If you are in a hotter zone, sometimes they'll actually hold that foliage through the winter. I've noticed even in zone 8B at Buckholz Nursery in the greenhouse, they tend to hold foliage more than they do here, which is interesting, but you get a whole different experience with that kind of translucent growth going on. Eventually they'll drop all the foliage and replenish it, much like an evergreen magnolia. Beautiful plants to be growing, guys. I love what this one brings, and it makes such a weird pairing with all the other Japanese maples in the garden.